So it's like it was easier for me to ease myself into these situations, to boil myself in the pot slowly versus jumping straight into the boiling pot.
Hello and welcome to Did I Do That? It's a podcast about making graphic design and making mistakes because it's all part of the process. I'm Sean Schumacher, and joining me today, a very special guest. He's a Pittsburgh-born, Oregon-based illustrator and designer who's concepted and created across a wide variety of media. I think I should keep stumbling over it because that's really going to make it easier to edit. A wide variety of media over the last 15-ish years, ranging from immersive physical experiences to influencer seeding kits to branding, animation, print, web, and more. He's led creative projects for the likes of Nike, Coke, General Mills, the Portland Trail Blazers, Planned Parenthood, and EA, among others. And these days, you can catch him spinning records every Saturday night on XRAY FM on his show, A Century of Slang. It's Brandon Hrycyk.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi there, Sean. It's a beautiful introduction.
Thank you so much. So anything weird happening to you today? How's your day going?
Today has been not too bad. It's great. Anything weird? The rain happened today. That's the weirdest thing.
That's the weirdest thing.
Believe it or not.
It is kind of, as we're recording this, the dead of summer, the period where it is normally just, 95 degrees plus.
As it was yesterday, probably.
Exactly. It was quite hot yesterday. And we're back to, kind of the Portland sneeze of winter. But yeah, that's the weirdest thing that's happened to you today. Nothing else weird that's occurred?
Well, outside of the bean sweatsuit.
Okay, so for the listener, do you want to describe my look real quick?
I would love to describe your look.
Please.
So it's a gorgeous all over print top and bottom sweatsuit covered with beans, Bush's baked beans.
In fact, it is Bush's baked beans. The down the leg of this all over print, which has gigantic beans on it. These
really
beans
big
are
beans, not to scale.
No, these are not to scale. You would need quite a can to hold all of these beans.
Yeah, perhaps a can per bean. In fact.
Oh God, that would be so horrible. You tip the can over and it just slowly drips out like what's like the purple Thanksgiving goo.
Kind of looks like cranberry sauce.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, the gelatin cranberry sauce, but
purple
just
Thanksgiving goo.
But a bean.
Yeah. It says That Beautiful Bean Company down the back, and on the on the back.
You've got to do that Bush's best.
Yeah, I've got to actually represent for Bush, Bush's Baked Beans.
Oh.
Good thing to know if you do buy the Bush's Baked Beans merch. Don't put anything in the pockets because it'll just slide right out.
They got real shallow pockets.
I should probably get my phone before I roll over it.
Go for it. I support that.
Professional radio.
This is the way it works.
That's what it is.
I mean, the amount of stuff that I've dropped. Mid-show.
So I picked this up a couple weeks ago because I was being advertised relentlessly on Instagram for Bush's Baked Beans merch. I don't know how I fell into the trap of being the number one potential consumer of Bush's Baked Beans on the Instagram service. I'm not sure what metadata they've collected on me that says, this idiot is really going to buy some baked bean stuff.
A lot of Google searches for beans.
Yeah, so they have a whole very elaborate store of things, which I'm going to pull up here. This is actually, I believe, the brainchild of Carmichael Lynch. I think we've all seen these weird stunt products out there. What I admire about what Carmichael Lynch has done is you can actually buy their weird stunt projects. This is like a real thing.
I do love it. It's just it's so graphic.
It's very graphic. Like the rendering quality of the beans on this is so much above my expectations even. Like this is like really high quality. So I'm handing you the iPad that contains the entirety of the Bush's Baked Beans store.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah,
There's
a lot of stuff up there.
Yeah, the beautiful bean bucket hat. That's great.
I really tried hard to get the bucket hat. That was what I think primarily thought that I was going to get. But by the time I got to it, they were sold out.
Oh,
which is
sure. Well, the alliteration there is really great. Oh, the bean slides are kind of nice. It's just the footbed of beans.
It just says beans.
Which I do like that.
Beans underfoot.
Yeah.
Just so everyone who kind of comes around you can just think that you're standing on just something truly disgusting. I think the biggest problem with this is sort of the appearance of beans.
Fair enough.
That's sort of a core issue. I think otherwise this is a perfect 100% A+ idea.
I think it's a great idea. Yeah. I mean, I support it. I really support it. And in fact, the over-magnified beans that do get a little graphic and a little disturbing, I am completely here for it, and I think it's a great thing.
Do you think they actually hired a photographer to take this wonderful bean texture as a photo?
I don't know how else you would do it.
Some macro lens.
I mean, I guess you could have asked AI to do it, I suppose, but I think I would hope. I would really hope. And if I found out that they didn't, I was like, I don't want this.
Please, if you are out there, I know we have photographers who listen to this show. If you photographed or art directed this photo shoot that resulted in the incredible all over bean pattern that I'm currently wearing, I would love to talk to you.
Yeah, I mean, because you did a great job, whoever you are, mysterious photographer. Like the texture on those beans, they're just perfect. Looks beautiful.
Yeah. They look real slimy.
Oh, so slimy.
So slimy.
So slimy. Like it looks exactly like a big baked bean you'd want to put in your mouth. It's just right there, right for you. I love it. Dude, the button-up shirt ain't too bad either.
No, it's such a funny mix of like things that are genuinely kind of respectable and then
I think so.
Nonsense, absolute nonsense, like what I've purchased,
like the earbud case, for example.
Yeah,
like the little ear beans.
Yeah. He's gonna put some little ear beans in.
Which I think is really adorable.
TM. We own ear beans. Nobody else take that one. That's us.
Please. Oh, well, this is beautiful. I'm really glad you brought this to my awareness because the sweater is also quite nice. The holiday sweater, which is vaguely, you could not wear it for the holidays. You could just wear it for the seasonally. There's nothing particularly Christmas about it.
Well, the great part is that Christmas season essentially starts now, is what I've learned from stores.
Fair enough. That is true.
Yeah, pretty much you could start wearing it right now if it were not, 1,000% humidity today.
Right, exactly. Oh my, I just love it. Yeah, and even the colors of the holiday sweater, it looks vaguely like a hockey jersey, but which is not bad.
Maybe they're targeting the Canadian market. Who knows?
Maybe.
Yeah.
The Canadians love beans. Perhaps.
Canadians, reach out. Tell us if you love beans. I'm asking for a lot of listener feedback on this episode. So that's a little bit of what's going on in the world of beans. Brandon, you biked over here today.
I did.
I gotta say, I admire that. I think you're maybe the first guest who's actually biked here.
I can't believe that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Well, it could be that I'm usually recording these at an even earlier time, which might be
something
too ambitious for some folks. But
well, again, and I understand, but I like riding my bike.
Yeah.
That's what it's here for. And if I can, and it was a perfect day for me to do it. And it wasn't, like I said, like we talked about earlier, it's not that hot.
No, it's not too bad. It's a perfect day for getting out and remembering what the rest of the year is going to be like here in Portland, Oregon.
I know it's smoky now, and I know it's not. I understand that.
Some smoky baked beans
but
out there.
At the same time, I do love the summertime, and so I just love it. And
it's the thing that makes the rest of it feel worth it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like June, July, especially.
Yeah. So I don't go easily into that autumn season. Is the thing. I mean, I know it has to happen. I can't argue with the weather.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
It's coming.
It's coming.
Whether you want
whether
it
I want
or
or not. So that's okay.
Yeah. But you're not originally from Portland, right? You are from Pittsburgh.
That's correct. I am not from Portland, but I've been here for quite a while. But I am originally from Pittsburgh. I was born and raised outside of Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh, basically. So I spent a lot of my youth there, and I went to college basically there.
Would you, like, first of all, did you use some of the incredible Pittsburgh slang, like John's?
Well, John, okay,
Or-
I'm going to stop you right there.
Oh, that's not a
because
Pittsburgh.
that's not a Pittsburgh thing.
Oh, I've already stepped right in it.
So it's okay. It's all right, but because it's easy to mix up. But that's from the other side of the state. That's a Eastern Pennsylvania, primarily Philadelphia thing.
I didn't realize that.
And,
Okay.
And Pittsburgh and Philadelphia are very different.
Yeah.
On opposite sides of a very large state.
Is it the Yins thing?
The Yins thing is very Pittsburgh. We have all sorts of Pittsburgh has all sorts of its own things. John just is the one that's not.
Stepped right on that landmine,
which is fine. And I actually am excited that you gave me the opportunity to explain the two.
Please.
So that's great. Yeah, but Yins is very popular. I wish I had thought about that. But there's like Slippy instead of Slippery is a popular one.
Slippy?
Yeah, it's outside. It's kind of icy. It's kind of slippy today. That was a popular one.
That seems more efficient.
Well, I thought
we should all be using that.
I didn't even think it was that big of a deal until someone pointed it out to me.
Why does Slippery have that weird extra R in it?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
It's you could slip. It's Slippy.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of special language that Pittsburgh has, and an accent which I still struggle to really get the meat of the accent, and like try to impersonate it. It's so hard. It's so difficult.
Even as a native Pittsburgher, you don't have the capability to do it.
There's something about it. Like it's very subtle, but if I can hear it from a mile away, I remember I don't know how long this was ago. It was probably maybe 10 years ago. I went to, I believe it was either L.A. or Hawaii. It's one of those two. Don't remember which one. We went to, but
there's beaches.
The thing is that it was far away from where I grew up, and we landed, and we were on a shuttle from the airport to, I don't know, maybe a rental car place, something like that.
Sure.
And I heard the shuttle driver talking, and I was just like, oh man, I think I recognize that. I recognize the way he said "and" or something. There was like some way he like swallowed a certain syllable, and I was like, hey, do you happen to be from Pittsburgh? And he was like, I am. And I was,
wow.
And I was just like, and it's really recognizable.
The shibboleth can be that small.
You can hear it, but I just can't do it for some reason. And I always admire the people who are able to really get that. I think there's a real magical skill to that, and I think it's a listening skill.
Well, I think there's also something just beautiful about regional accents, which are disappearing completely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I still, for the longest time, had a little bit of like kind of the regional accent of my upbringing, which was a little more southern than this, and that is just gone in Las Vegas.
So okay, so that's actually quite interesting as well. I didn't realize that Las Vegas had its own type of accent.
Well, there were a lot of people who migrated there from the South. We also had a lot of Utahns, and so there's definitely a very distinctive Utah accent, which I think is still a thing.
Oh, that's interesting. I like that.
It's very measured. I can't really do it anymore.
Sure, that's fine.
Toy cars at Wendy's. That's what it sounds like.
I think I get it.
My mom and grandma were hired to do a commercial once by my dad, who produces commercials, and they, for toy cars at Wendy's, God only knows what the reason is. But the two of them together had such strong Utah accents saying toy cars at Wendy's that I guess he played that commercial for the regional Wendy's people, and they were like, what is this? We don't want this.
I love that. I mean, it sounds familiar to like a, or at least the way you said it, just like a Midwestern, like
it is
almost like a Wisconsin-ish type
very
of
much
accent.
So yeah, it's a little, because I think there's a lot of migration from that part of the country into Utah. So yeah. There's a little Midwestern in there, and there's a little bit of kind of Southern twang in there, a little drawl. And now that's all gone from my vocal stylings.
Well, again, if you don't use it, if you don't hear it every day, is the thing. Like my mom has it. Like she has the Pittsburgh accent. Like, and I can hear it come out in her. My dad slightly less so. I don't know why. They didn't live that far away from one another. It just seemed to happen.
Yeah, just environmentally, maybe the parents had it stronger on one side than the other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's like, I guess my grandma had it, and again, like that's my mom's mom, I guess is the better way to put it. But yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah,
I love it.
So you were growing up in Pittsburgh. Like, what do you remember? Kind of what your first appreciation of design was, or your first idea of like this might be a thing that you could do?
I thank you for asking that question. And it took me a while to even be aware of design as a thing at all.
That's pretty common.
Yeah,
I would say
that's good to hear because
Yeah.
like I didn't know, and but I think the things that really sucked me in from the beginning were like a few things. Like I collected a lot of comic books as a child.
Oh yeah.
And comics was, there's beautiful covers. There's a lot of, again, just illustration inside, the way pages are arranged. Like that was a big deal. But, like Calvin and Hobbes and Garfield and all those types of things. And again, I didn't ever even think of that even as graphic design. Like, didn't even consider it.
No, and I was influenced by a lot of the same stuff, and it made me think like, oh, cartoonist is a job, but the idea that there would be like this other kind of, circle around that is
Exactly.
maybe a little bit more lucrative.
Yeah.
Today.
Well, it's funny because that was like, those were probably the first things that made me aware of art as a thing.
Yeah.
And I viewed design as, adjacent to art. But then the other thing that happened as I got slightly older was I got into music. And I started to collect records, or CDs is probably what I was collecting at that time, and tapes and CDs.
But in a way, the biggest delivery form of design to young people. Like,
yes.
You could do really cool stuff on albums, be they records or CDs.
Absolutely.
And that was like what you aspired to do.
Yep. And that probably more than anything else was the thing that made me aware of like, oh, wow, this is amazing. Someone's doing this. And I was like, I love this. And this is just, and I love the music. But then I was like, there's this whole other element to it. And I really got into that and just focusing on that as like a thing. And like, I loved the way records were designed. I wanted to do that. And then I also, as a child of that era, I made a lot of mixtapes.
Yeah.
And as a person who was enamored with cover design, like, what do? You make your own covers for little mixtapes when you're handing them out to friends. And so that was probably my first, like, me being a designer was like, it was very like collage-y type of a thing because I didn't have any, there was no equipment, there was no technology to use. I didn't have a computer. I just had a bunch of old magazines. My great aunt probably had like a pile of 40-year-old National Geographics that I could get up and like.
Well, and it's all such an analog process. Like, I don't think younger people today would even realize, like, when you're making a mixtape, it is a playlist, but it's not like a playlist. You can't just, if you want a song on it, you've got to go and get the album and then get the tape machine that has 2 decks in it, so you're recording off of one.
Yep.
It's a complicated, like, precise timing, and if you mess something up, the whole thing's, screwed.
So much like that. And yeah, just getting like the gap between the songs right. I would get really anal about it, but like it was but I had the time to be anal about it. So I got really into it. And I loved it. And the more I started to like get into that, and then I got into the covers and like making these, which I thought at the time were these really cool little things. And, they are. Then I do appreciate the fact that I did it. I haven't seen one in a while, so I don't know. But but I was proud of them at the time.
And you have this beautiful little object at the end that you're like, I made this. And,
yes.
Other people can hold on to it, and it feels all the more special because it has that character and that quality.
Absolutely.
To it.
I could not agree with you more. And like, that's what made it all so special. And like something that just, you could not be replicated. I mean, it could be, but it would be hard. But yeah, so that was probably the way I got into it initially, was like just doing that over and over again. But again, not really knowing what that meant.
Yeah.
I didn't think anything of it. To me, it just felt like a thing that I was doing in my room, like equivalent to drawing dumb little cartoon strips. That I would do. It was like, it felt completely related to that in that it was just something fun. Like I could have been playing with micro machines, but no, I was doing this instead. And I viewed them totally on equal footing.
Really?
Yeah. And I just didn't think of it as a career or anything. And it wasn't until I was and even my high school, there was no I was doing that kind of stuff. I guess I wasn't playing Micro Machines in high school, but I was making tapes.
We could start a Micro Machines club. All we have to do is get into high school, which I'm sure won't be an issue.
Probably not. No. But I did love my Micro Machines. I did have a lot of those. And
the guy talks so fast.
oh, he talks so fast, and I love that guy. Man.
You got to get Micro Machines. They're really good.
Well, that was a pretty good impression. I don't think I could be able to do it, but man, he's good and just fascinating individual. I used to love those commercials dearly. But yeah, so that was basically how I started getting into it, was that kind of thing, and just slowly wanting to get a little bit better at it, or not even wanting to get better, but you ended up doing that. Like the more you do anything, you just get better, even if you're not even trying that hard.
Even if you don't realize it's a thing you could do.
Right, exactly. Oh, and I guess that was the other thing I was trying to get to was, I'm in high school, I'm doing these things. Even in high school, I had no idea that graphic design was a career or even a thing. I still didn't know. And, I hear that people tell me that kind of stuff eventually. It's like, oh, maybe I had a graphic design course in high school. We didn't have any of that.
Yeah, same here. I think now there is a little bit more exposure to this, but there's still a lot of folks that I see, coming through here at PSU that like had no idea that this was a field in high school, and they're young.
And I think that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Even like I think you getting into it and very much not thinking of it that way is such a healthy way to get into it.
Yeah.
So that was basically, I was in school doing that, and then a dear friend of mine who was a year older than me, when he graduating, I was like, well, what are you doing? Like, what are you gonna do? And he's just like, oh, I'm gonna do graphic design. And I was just like, what is that? And he's just like, oh, it's just like, like magazines and stuff. And I was just like, magazines and stuff. And I was like, what do you mean? It's like, what it looks like. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, all right, sure. Like that sounds cool. Like I read magazines.
Yeah,
like, I read Mad Magazine. I was into those types of things. It's like, I guess someone does have to put those together. And there are like choices between fonts and stuff. And suddenly, like something that had been in front of my face forever, like suddenly cracked open when suddenly I realized, like, oh, that's a thing.
And this is right at your end of your high school career.
Right at the end, and like having to decide what I wanted to do. And it's funny because, and I guess this probably just speaks to my age or whatever, but talking to family, I was just like, what are you going to do in college? And I was like, well, I don't know. And they're like, well, you should do computers. And I was just like, I remember saying it to,
getting that
to like
too,
a great
yeah.
aunt. I was like, computers? What does that mean? Yeah. It was like, working on computers. And I was like, well, isn't everything on a computer? Which it was, or getting that way.
Yeah.
And so eventually, once I went into graphic design, they're like, oh, great. Well, you're getting into computers.
Oh, it's computers, eh?
So
that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was eventually
Plastics, the future.
Exactly. So it's, yeah.
Yeah.
So I did that and basically followed that friend to school because he went to a school that he was doing graphic design. It was a really tiny school outside of Pittsburgh. I would say it, but no one even knows what it is. This is a tiny little...
Not even a name check. Wow.
Well, I could give it. It's called LaRoche College, but I don't expect anyone to know what that is. But it was a tiny school, a little liberal arts school that had like a decent graphic design program, or at least that's what my friend said. And when I looked... when I looked into it,
he got his payola at the end of that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Refer a friend, get $25 off your next semester.
Exactly. So I went there, and so eventually I did that, and that was how I went to school for it, and that's how I started to get into it. But really, that was a long-winded way of answering how did I get into it. But
no, it's beautiful.
But it started with records and comic books, essentially.
So you're at college. Like, what is your first exposure to, like, this is actual work then? Like,
well, that came pretty quickly, like, because, I mean, it's school. Yeah. So it all becomes it becomes, in that context, it becomes very rigorous, and like you're like, here's tasks that you're given. It's like, okay, this is what you're going to do. And so it starts to put it all in some type of framework. The first classes were, and again, I haven't been in college for design in a long time, but I don't know exactly what it's like now, but there was like basic design classes. Yeah. Which in my particular school was basically playing around with black and white shapes.
Which is still the case in a lot of schools.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, that's good to hear, because I think it was really helpful. Because like otherwise I would have just started doing logos or trying to put together a page in a magazine, which I don't necessarily know if that would have been putting like the cart before the horse in many ways. So it's just like, I don't know if this is going to help me. But
editorial is a hard place to start.
Yes, it is. As I've learned later, as I did it a little bit, I did a whole lot of little things all over the place. But that was basically me learning what that was. But like basically, yeah, these weird classes with basic design classes where there's, again, playing with black or white cut out pieces of paper, or learning about repetition, or all those types of concepts that you end up utilizing. So that was basically doing that. And then I have other teachers who, there was classes, our big final project, which was a really fun one, which is called like larger than life. You just take a tiny little object and blow it up to 300 times its size.
As a drawing, or
no, as a thing.
No.
Like you have to like build it. Like
wow.
You have to, whatever it is, you have to build this huge structure. Not structure, but you have to build a thing. And so you have to pick something small, or if you want to pick something big, it could get really big. But
that's how we got King Kong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I picked like, for mine, I picked like a little can opener, and like this old vintage can opener, and like I worked with my grandfather and built this big can opener out of like wood that we ended up like mounting to the top of one of the buildings on the campus to make it look like it was like cranking off the roof of
my god,
which was really cute and really fun.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I really did. I got a lot out of that, and it was really cute, and the class was great, and the teacher, some of the instructors I had at that school were just wonderful people, and just beautiful people, and I'm just so happy. Joe Sendek was the teacher. I don't even know.
Hi, Joe.
Yeah, hi, Joe. I don't know. I don't know. I've lost touch with him. In the many years since I've been there, but he was such a great guy. Just like this classic, just like woodsy hippie guy, wear Canadian tuxedo, long blondish reddish hair. Like just such a great guy.
I mean, he could own a really high end coffee shop now in Portland.
Most likely,
absolutely.
But he probably wouldn't.
Yeah,
it's like he would probably not even live in Portland.
I mean, he doesn't do the day to day. Like no. he's got other people for that.
Exactly.
Like he drives out from Longview every couple of weeks.
That'd be more his style.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, he was. Yeah, he had a roastery somewhere out there. He would deal with that stuff. Maybe. Yeah, but he was great. So that was like, we did stuff like that, and that was like the first time like the classes where I started to like make my own like comic books or storybooks, and like again just thinking of design in other contexts.
Yeah.
And so those were really great times. And so that was mine. I did like I said, I did the can opener. And I remember one of the other ones that a person did that I actually took a part in, talk about mistakes.
Oh.
So I had another dear friend of mine who was decided to do like a little green army man. And
that's a lot.
Well, yeah,
because you're setting yourself up to sculpt a human, which
which could be
not
hard,
easy
unless you use an actual human. Which we took the class at different times, and so I wasn't taking the class when he did, and so he was like, "Hey, so like basically you're making this thing, and you install it on the campus, and then someone comes by, and then the teacher brings the people along to like look at it at a particular, like the grading time. It's like, oh, everyone's going to walk around and see all these pieces.
Yeah.
So he decided, it's like, well, I'm not going to do a permanent installation. I'm just going to use a person, and I'm going to use them as the thing. And I was just like, well, I'll help you out. Like he was working late at night, and I liked staying up late, and so I was like, I'll help you out. So basically, what he ended up doing was like dressing me in just like in clothes, and like these long, like they were kind of military outfits, but he also made like a plaster cast of my face.
Oh God.
To put that on top of it. And then, Green Army Men, there's not a lot of like great detail there. It's all just like the same flat green.
Yeah.
Which means he painted the whole thing. So like I was covered in like painted clothes and a painted like plaster cast mask. And I remember like doing it, and like the day of the presentation, like I had to stand there and I had all the stuff on, and I have this plaster cast mask that's covered in paint that's might not even be dry, and so like I'm inhaling just this paint, and I remember like the class and like me trying to stand still while everyone's staring at me, and like the fumes running through my brain, and just like, oh boy, things are getting dizzy, and I think I may have passed out like like maybe like right at the end of the presentation or right when it was over. And I was like, oh man, this is terrible.
Did he have a giant magnifying glass hanging over your head? Maybe this was part of the
that would have been wonderful. It would have been great.
Yeah.
And then to make it even better for me, which was this was during, these presentations come at the end of a semester, which means it's like finals time, which means I have another final going on after this.
Oh no!
Like I had a public speaking class, and so like I had the public speaking class final is just like what do you call that? Like impromptu. So like you're just given a topic and you have to talk about it.
Oh no!
And so I remember oh my gosh, like I remember like basically like stumbling out of this me standing as a fake soldier and like wandering across to the other side of campus like I have to get to my class. I got this final I gotta take.
And you are having just passed out.
I mean, just past that, I still have like green paint on like the side of my face. And
so you're basically Tobias Funke.
Oh, most likely, most definitely. And
you
I
just
walked
green
in there,
yourself.
Yeah, and I think the topic I got was like UFOs, which I thought was like, wow, this is kind of funny. But like I don't remember what I said. I don't remember a whole lot of that afternoon. Like I think those brain cells have been well evaporated.
I mean, you maybe just showing up the way that you were, probably kind of spacey, kind of as though, I don't want to say, that character from the first Men in Black movie that's the bug that takes over the skin suit. But
I looked kind of similar to that.
Yeah, that may have been evidence enough for the presidents of UFOs.
Oh yeah, I was pale. Yeah, looked very shifty.
Constantly
my own skin.
asking for sugar water.
Exactly.
Sugar.
But yeah, so that was a long story.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It was excellent though. So you're getting through your design education. Like, what do you do when you graduate? Where do you go next?
So essentially, by that point, I got out of school. I still didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I knew I wanted to get a job, but I didn't know what that meant. And so for the first year, I graduated in 2001. And
a great time to be graduating.
and that was
no problems.
No problems on the horizon there.
No.
So I remember graduating in June or May or whatever, and I moved back home and I was living at home, and then September happened, and I was like, oh boy, okay, this could be a problem.
Yeah.
And so basically that was. Things got postponed a little bit because there wasn't, as a junior designer, I was having a really hard time finding work during that time.
Yeah, well, I think people forget that like everything kind of stopped for like 3 or 4 months, pretty much.
Most likely.
Yeah.
It definitely felt that way. And so I was just continually looking for work.
Yeah.
And so I was struggling with that for a while, but eventually I finally found my first job at like this tiny little communications agency out in Philadelphia. And I was like, okay, like this is farther than I was intending on going, but I'm going to do it. And this is going to be great. And so I moved out there and basically just on my own. I didn't know anybody out there. And so I just kind of figured it out. And,
wow.
And so it was really, I had the company that I worked for they were really sweet.
Yeah.
And it's just so like I was a fish out of water. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was like away from. I'd gone away to college, but this was the first time I had like been away in some form like this,
properly away.
Yeah. So I was like, oh boy, gotta figure this out. But I did, and it was great, and I learned so much at that first job. Like I was doing I was doing logos. I was doing magazines for like the Multiple Sclerosis Association of America. And
wow.
Yeah, doing like those types of things. So like these weird, I don't know if they were monthly or bi-monthly, like 100-page magazines that I was like, you gotta do these. And it was just me laying out magazines. So learning magazine layout and like how all that stuff works. Fortunately, it was just like a magazine for a nonprofit. So like design standards weren't like super high, but it was like but it was a wonderful way to learn all of this stuff.
Because you're just constantly having to iterate. Like you have
so
100 pages in each issue, and you got to pump out a couple issues every month, I'm guessing. Like,
well, not a couple issues every month. It was like an issue every 2 months. I think.
Okay, all
so
right.
It was a little more reasonable, but it took a long time to get all of that, pull all that information together. And because, you're working with, I'm working with people who some people are like writing the articles and or at least editing them, and you're pulling in like high-res PDFs for ads that you have to lay into these monstrous files that were like crashing my system like regularly. And so it was
billboard size is okay for ad delivery, right? You wanted it billboard size?
Well, the funny thing is like billboard size sometimes would be better than what we got, which was like
that's true,
postcard stamp size. God. So it's just like, this looks terrible. Like, do you know this looks terrible? And so there's a lot of that, like struggling through those types of things, but great learning, as far as figuring out like large form magazine just structure and figuring out layout and brand guidelines and all of those things where I didn't know any of that at the time. And so it taught me a whole lot really quickly. And it felt very stressful because, like, again, like you're working with these huge files full of possibly corrupted like PDFs. Like you're hoping it doesn't. And then when you're exporting your final files and things are crashing, and again, like it taught me a lot about stressful situations.
2001. Would you have been on Quark doing this too? The crashiest
was
program there ever was.
I did work on Quark at that time. Yeah, that was exactly when that was, and that was. It was tough.
Yeah.
No other way to put it.
Not famed for its reliability,
No.
Quark Express.
No, not at all.
When there's like a subversion of a third level point version, and that's the only version that's reliable, that's a problem.
It's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a problem. And so we did that. I did that for a while, doing those types of things, and it was. We did like a couple different magazines. I think we were pumping out because it wasn't just that one; it was a couple other ones. But it was fun, and I felt like I was really doing something. And also, since it was like a nonprofit, there was very little oversight.
Yeah.
Which to me was really exciting. So I was just like, I can do whatever I want. Like, no one's telling me to do anything. Like, no one's telling me not to do this. And I was like, I can do this. So it was really so I was able to. I mean, did it look great? I don't know. Probably not. I probably wouldn't be too proud of it now. But the point is, like, I got to do it, and it was amazing, and like I learned so much.
Yeah.
And just doing all that was just very powerful as far as a learning tool. I learned more probably in those 2 years at that place than all 4 years of college.
Well, and I think that's almost like the kind of perfect place to start as a junior designer, where you have that freedom to learn and iterate and just churn out work.
Absolutely.
And get over the terror of like putting something into print too.
Yeah.
Which is huge.
Oh, absolutely. And
you have a press deadline. You got to meet it.
Yeah, you have to meet it. You have to. And so, there was, it wasn't like ad agency, like late night type things.
Yeah.
That would eventually happen to me. But at that stage, it was a slightly lower stakes. So that made it a little bit easier, but the pressure was still there and the levels of complexity were still there. And so that was great. And the owner of the company was really sweet, so I didn't necessarily have to deal with big egos, which I know can also happen sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure any designer would know that. But again, like I got out of school and I was certainly a little gun shy. I was just like, I don't know what kind of environment I want to get myself into.
Yeah.
As far as like my first job out of school, because I still felt a little shaky.
Yeah. And I think you may have also had the thing that I see a lot of students have, which is that feeling of your first job is going to be the job that defines the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
Instead of this is a job that you're going to be in it for maybe 2 years at most.
At most.
Yeah.
At most. And I didn't, and I thought that too. And I definitely had that in mind. And a lot of people definitely that I graduated with were definitely of that same. It's like this means everything. If this doesn't work out, like I'm done.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that that's not true. But also there was a lot of people that I may have graduated with that never got much farther. They're
Yeah.
like there's a lot of kids that I graduated with that like graphic design like just didn't stick for a long term thing, and they just kind of moved on to some other role. And then that's actually what a lot of teachers told us.
Yeah,
it's like a lot
it's
of you
really
won't stick
common.
with this.
Like,
And I remember thinking, I was like, well, are you serious? Like
Yeah.
all of this, we're not going to do it. But I get it now. I did stick with it, and I'm glad that I did. But I can also see why. It's like anything else. It's any career might not be the right fit for everyone. And this is an interesting, again, if you get into it, reading comic books and record covers, and that's your drive, and you don't, and now you're doing Multiple Sclerosis Association of American magazines. I was like, well, maybe is this what I wanted to do? But at the same time, like I could see that there was a long road ahead of me, and that I just needed to be willing to be on it.
Yeah.
And that was the important part.
At what point did the kind of path start to fork for you where you're like, I need to maybe go into a different role?
So that happened after a couple of years of being there. I had a friend who lived out in Portland, and the friend was like, it's really cool here. And it's really neat. It's a really cool place. And this is like, I don't know, this was 2005, something like that. I don't remember. And I was like, oh, okay. And I loved Philadelphia, and I still do. And I didn't necessarily even want to leave.
Yeah.
But I also realized, I was like, well, I should probably, if I'm going to make a move like that, I should probably do it now before, I don't know, I start piling on responsibilities and a shift like that becomes harder.
Yeah. And I mean, I think 2005 too, this would have been like an era where it's really cheap to live in Portland.
For sure.
Maybe even cheaper than Philadelphia.
It was at the time. Yeah.
And like, a lot of opportunity, a lot of desire for creative like folks out here.
Yeah.
That like there wasn't the need being met yet for people.
And like Portland was really cool, and it was on the West Coast. Again, I was still heavily, I mean, I always have been, but I was then too. I was heavily into music, and it was like there was also there was so much music going on here, and bands that would come through here, and it felt like it was more than even Philadelphia, which seems silly because Philadelphia is a huge hub of everything. But I wanted to get the opportunity to move, and so I did, and so I just I moved out here without anything, and so tried to just move out here and figure it out.
Oh, you just brought nothing with you. It was just
I quit my job and just moved. And so there was, I had a bunch of weird jobs when I first moved here too. Like I moved out here, and it was like 4 steps backwards.
Yeah.
At first. But a lot of that was just because, like you said, I knew no one. I knew nothing. And so I had to kind of build everything up from scratch again. So yeah, when I first moved here, like my first jobs I was working as like a temp, as like a file boy for a paper company. Like I was literally working in like a mobile home in a warehouse, because that was where the offices were.
Oh, okay, I've seen that.
It's a big warehouse, and you can't heat the whole thing, and people are going to work in there, so they have to create this little smaller space. And so I was working in this portable home in a warehouse, like just doing file boy stuff for like a little bit, not that long, probably 7 or 8 months, until I was really started to panic. Like I need to actually exercise my design stuff. I'm going to forget it. So then eventually after that, I found my first design job, which was like a production designer job at like a food company.
Oh, really?
Out in like near Gresham.
Like doing like labels or?
Well, like kind of like labels, like sales sheets.
Oh.
There was like this company that makes soup. And so there's a company that makes soup, and they made soup for, like if you go to Safeway and you go to buy like their private label soup. This is the company that would make that soup.
Interesting.
And so basically I was, again, just really just simple stuff. It wasn't even the labels. It was like sales sheets and stuff like that.
Behind the scenes.
Very behind the scenes stuff.
Very B2B.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, it was fine, but at the very least, I told myself, at least I'm working the programs. I'm not forgetting this stuff.
Yeah.
And then after like a year of that, I moved on to Planned Parenthood, which is when I got hired on there, which I was really happy about that one. It was a big step up. I was like, I was working in design again, like real design. I was like, I'm being hired to be a designer, not just a production designer. And so.
And a place with a mission too, which you kind of didn't get to have in the other jobs.
No, I certainly did not. And so this felt like a fun opportunity to have that, right? And and the mission part was a really nice thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who work there definitely felt that way and believed that way, and they were really into it. So that was really great, and I really admired that for many years. But it's also after you work in a while, it's also just a job too.
Yeah,
so
it's just a job and a nonprofit job
At a nonprofit
that,
job.
which is it wears on you.
it wears on you a lot.
You
And,
put on some city miles doing a nonprofit job.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. So yeah, there's a lot of not good pay. The benefits are great, but again, like it was still fun, and I got to do interesting things, and a lot of it was they have lots of fundraiser events, so it's like you're working on letterheads and posters.
Oh yeah,
but you're also working on like wayfinding signage for the different clinics around and stuff like that. So once again, really learning brand guidelines. These are the things that are really starting to stick, and I'm starting to learn. And like you have to design annual reports every year, and I was really getting interested in like annual report design because like I really enjoyed that process. Again, it spoke to the magazine days, but
but this also
easier.
would have been the heyday of annual reports.
It was
like 08, 09, like infographics like explode, and
Yes.
Everyone wants to have a really cool annual report again.
It's true. And so you're learning how to do that without necessarily, because you're working in a nonprofit, so there's not a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so like you're trying to accomplish stuff with very small budgets.
Were you the only designer there?
I was the only designer.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy, because that even then they would have been really big.
Well, so I should clarify a little bit. So this was not like Planned Parenthood National.
Yeah,
that
this
was
is
its own thing based in
the
New
regional...
York. This was Planned Parenthood Columbia Willamette. It was our regional thing, which serviced Oregon and Southwest Washington. I don't know how many clinics there are in that area, or there were at the time, but there was probably, I don't know, 17 or something like that.
That's pretty big.
It was a lot. And so there was a lot, again, wayfinding signage, you're doing events and all that kind of stuff, which I enjoyed. And once again, as the only designer, and the only person above me was like a marketing coordinator. So there was no creative director or art director. I was that person. And
they're often deferring to you for like those types of decisions because they don't know. And
so I was going to them at first. I was like, oh, what do you think of this? And they're like, oh, I think it's okay. And so after a while, I was like, oh, wait, I'm that guy. I'm the person now. And I was like, okay, all right, great. Like, I guess that's what this feels like. And so basically just like coming to terms with things like really easily and slowly at my own pace. And so that was really nice. And to me, it worked. It worked for me. So I could be an anxious guy. So it's like it was easy for me to like to ease myself into these situations, to boil myself in the pot slowly versus jumping straight into the boiling pot.
That's nonprofit life for you.
Yeah.
It'll boil you real slow.
Exactly. So I did that for many years. I did that for almost 5 years. And
that's a long
time. It was a long time. And it was a long time. And I realized that there because there's a lot of people who had come and gone in that period of time. But eventually I started to realize that I was like, well, I think I want slightly more of a challenge, and I'd like to get paid better.
Yeah.
And that was the other part. So then I started to to dip my toes into like, well, what are these agencies like? This is the thing that I had been desperately avoiding and trying to push away from me for many years at that point. But then I was like, all right, I'll see what I can do. And so then I found a job at there's this other agency in town that was like a retail design agency. And I was like, okay, I'll give that a shot.
Yeah.
And like they interviewed me, and I got in. And at the time this is where things start to get really all over the place. If they weren't, because before it's whatever. It was a process to get there. But then at this job, like I got hired on, it was like a strategy agency within the retail agency, which was like, so they were kind of divorced. They were the mobile home inside the warehouse. So basically they had their own. They were like very strategy based, and so I was like hired for that and working there, and that was where like all my fears about what an agency would be like I was like, oh, these are all real. These are all real fears, and this is a real thing, and egos are real things, and creative directors can be not fun, and so I learned a lot in that first year. It was like suddenly, it was 60 to 70 hour weeks, just grueling, just punishing. It's like, oh, not, half the time it's like, don't do personal, don't have a personal life, that kind of stuff, all the negative things you hear. So like did that for a while, and that was tough. But I met a lot of really sweet people there, and that was really great. And so a lot of the other designers, which was just so eye-opening to me, because as I may have described from my other jobs, like wasn't really working with a whole lot of other designers. I was like the sole person at all these places. But then suddenly I had all these other people around me, and it was so enlightening and so wonderful to hear what everyone else was doing or inspired by, or just other creatives who were just ridiculously creative.
Yeah.
And that was so powerful.
At a great time to be doing that here, too. Like,
absolutely.
You actually have a network now, and like,
absolutely
can tap into it.
Yes. And so I was there for like a year, and then the creative director I had, who wasn't my favorite creative director, like ended up leaving. He quit and moved on to another job.
Oh, what a shame.
And I was like, oh, what a shame. But then like the whole strategy agency just kind of fell apart.
Oh,
and,
God.
Like, just,
Oh, no.
and it just ended without it. Turned out the whole company was just called a cult of personality, and that little thing just kind of stopped, and it ended, and basically. But it was okay, because even if it was, like I said, it was within this other company, and so once it dissolved, we just kind of got absorbed into the rest of the company.
Okay.
So, which wasn't the worst thing in the world, but
No.
then that was when I got. So it went from very strategy-based things, which again, like you just talking about decks and just making decks, with words and pictures, and that's what it was. Nothing like tangible was coming out of any of these things, which is fine. Whatever.
Yeah.
That's a job. That's a job like any other.
But the house falls away like in a Buster Keaton short.
Yes.
And all of a sudden you're doing real stuff.
We're doing real stuff. So I'm pulled into doing retail work. So a lot of it was working for Nike, like doing like small store window banners and stuff based on larger. And so it kind of felt a little production-y at first. And I was like, okay, this is fine, but this is what it is. I'm glad I still have this job. So I was like doing that for a while, but then gradually, like the work began to change while I was there and get better.
Oh,
that
doesn't happen very often.
No, and in fact, this is like it's not. In fact, when I tell people this story, most people are not anticipating it goes that direction. But it got, I stayed at that job for 8 years.
Wow,
and it was, to me, it just got better throughout that time. Where like at first it started with window banner stuff at first, which was a lot of fun, but then the stores got more complicated, and you were building out real stores, and it was becoming more creative. And eventually, I'm trying to remember when this came along, but we had our first seating kit started to happen. And for me, like that was the stage where like the most of my career changed. Nike was releasing a new shoe.
Okay.
And it was going to be a special colorway of the shoe, like very limited colorway. But this colorway has like a story behind it. Like, so the shoe has a story. How are you going to tell that story? And like, so basically a seating kit is a glorified shoebox, but like, but it's really fun. And like, it's a way to tell a story with graphics in this box essentially. And like you get to throw in other elements. Again, your bean sweatsuit, that would go so perfectly into a Bush's seating kit. Like,
oh,
for
absolutely.
Example, like it would be perfect for it. Like,
well, that's like, this is the kind of thing I was talking about. Like you would see those things on very limited production runs where, I mean, how many of those were you making for each thing? Like,
not very many.
Yeah.
Very few. Like,
what's crazy about this is they made it for regular people to buy.
Right. Well, sure.
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, like, you do these seating kits, these small runs, and you put them out there, and, it's mainly just for Instagram, essentially.
Yeah.
So someone opens it and they show it to you, and it's like, look at all the stuff that you can't have, and that I can, and but basically, like, this type of thing, like, makes sense. So it's just like, oh, people want this. People actually would want to buy this stuff, and like these ideas are just weirdo ideas.
Yeah.
And so that was what was so fun about it. Was just like, it was just just weirdo ideas. It's like, come up with just some weird stuff that you can put together in this interesting box, and then someone gets to open it on screen.
That's beautiful.
And to me, like, that was one of the most fun things.
Yeah.
Like, just the concepting of it and getting to sit in a room with 4 or 5 other people and just throw ideas at a wall and then like try to craft that into something, which was it was so wonderful. At least for me. And like, yeah.
Would you what would you get story-wise about the shoes, like when you were figuring them out? Like, would you have to create some of that yourself?
Sometimes you would, but a lot of the times the story was well established by Nike. Well, if Nike was telling the story, it was pretty well established. Let's put it that way. Because we did them for different companies, but the Nike ones, they know how to tell a story, and they know how to do that. And so when it would come from them, they would usually have a pretty well honed story behind it. So you knew kind of what the story needed to be. This was like, this colorway is inspired by Kevin Durant's love of music, and where he grew up in Washington D.C. or outside or whatever it is. That's the idea, essentially. So these are the type of things these are the loose storylines. So it's like, but how do you pull that together? Like, what does a love of music? What form does that take? So
it's like a great question.
So it's a real conceptual exercise, which is something that I learned that I really liked. Like, in fact, like that was the thing that I think I liked. One of the things I liked about graphic design the most was just the concept. Like, being strong was the most important thing. The execution, like, you could work around that, and like it's always nice to have it great, but a great concept carries a thing.
Yeah.
Carries a thing, because that's the thing that feels like that's going to make your brain light up.
It's the thing that you have to start at, because like it solves all the other problems.
It solves all the other problems.
Much easier ways than you could do just hammering at it.
Yeah. Because you can do it the other way, but sometimes it just feels like a waste of effort.
Yeah.
But this was great. And so like I started to do that. Like, so the first couple were like, these seating kits. The very first one I didn't even get to work on, but it's a set of 3 for like Ken Griffey Jr. And like he had like this shoe that was an old shoe of his he was getting into the Hall of Fame. And so they were releasing like these 3 different shoes with 3 different colorways and 3 different seating kits.
Oh, so it's not just an old shoe that he's like, I don't know, I don't want this anymore.
Well, no, it wasn't that. It wasn't exactly that. But no, Nike was selling them, and so this was the way for them to really get into it. So basically, that was what it started off with. And so we did these 3 beautiful boxes. And I was working with this other designer that his name's Brian Madden. He's just
Hi, Brian.
Hi, Brian. He was just an incredible person to work with. Just like, I'm very fortunate I had time to like work in those types of things with this guy, because he was just so creative. And so that was how I started doing it and learning all of that. And so it just kept happening, and we had some success doing them, and they were going very well. And so we just kept getting more seating kits, and gradually like that business started to grow. Like, first there was one, and now suddenly that was all I was working on. Like at this company where before I was doing like, retail store build out type things, and now it was just this.
Yeah.
And I didn't mind. And I was just like, I think some people might not have wanted to do it over and over again, but to me, it was just like, this is the coolest thing. I could just keep doing this. And so that was just what I did. And it was just over and over again, just concepting interesting boxes for different companies. Or no, a couple different companies, but mainly Nike. Like, that was the main thing, because they
do a lot of those kinds of things.
They do, yeah. So that was really great. And I think, I got so much out of that. And it was just fun and silly. Most of the times it was just silly. Like, so like there was one of the ones they did was for a Kyrie Irving. I know that he's not the most beloved basketball player right now, but at the time he was fine. He was not quite so controversial. But the thing was, he was coming out with a movie, because he was Uncle Drew, I think was his character. That was interesting too. Uncle Drew was like,
what?
It was a Pepsi commercial from like several years earlier, where he played like this old man who would play basketball like on like
He's doing
on the courts. Yeah, well, it was basically that. So he did that, and that was a Pepsi commercial. But then eventually they're going to make a movie out of it, and they were turning it into the movie. And to promote this movie, like, then suddenly Wheaties got involved, because Wheaties was going to put Kyrie Irving and Uncle Drew on the cover of the box, and so they were,
What madness is this?
yeah. And they're like, okay, so you're going to do this box. You're going to do this seating kit. It's going to involve Kyrie Irving and Uncle Drew and Wheaties and the shoe. And you got to like tie this all together. And so sometimes it would just be that, like, that's the story. And like, these are the elements of the story. Like,
we have this puzzle.
Together.
It's disassembled.
Yeah.
You figured out.
Exactly. So I got to, again, to work with some very, very dear, incredibly creative designers. So like just come up with this idea and like pull this all together. And we basically came up with this big shoebox that, that was essentially the shoes were, wrapped in like that cereal bag that you have to tear that open. Again, like all of these little elements, which were like so important. We're like thinking, it's like, what's the most important part about a cereal box? It's like, or the cereals, like when you tear open that thing and like the cereal pops out. So at first we were actually trying to put cereal into the bag
so
with the shoes,
like the prize inside.
So it would explode. But they're like, we don't want to get crumbs in our shoes. So it's like, fair enough. That's fair. So, but I was like, well, at least we need to tear it open. Like that needs to happen. We have to have that. And so that was really fun and just so impactful. And again, it was very successful. And it was something that just kept me going down that road.
What ultimately made you want to step away from that?
Well, so what made me want to? So this is another one where I can just give you a date and it will probably make sense.
Okay.
So basically, I did that and it was going very well for a very long period of time, and then 2020 came along.
Oh. No, actually, it's not ringing any bells.
No.
2020. 2020, like vision, like
right?
Perfect vision,
kind of like
a
that.
Year.
So
yeah,
if you can think of anything, so that happened, and that all kind of came to a screeching halt, and that's when things changed.
Yeah.
So basically, after that point, I was gone from that company and started to do freelance, and so that's why I kind of got into that world for a little bit during the pandemic, and so that was where that kind of led me to. And so I was like, okay, well, gonna start learning to do other things now. So, and which was fine. I was perfectly capable. And in fact, at that period of time, I had grown up doing a lot of drawing and sketching and illustrating. And I loved it. But I also, when I learned about graphic design, I put it aside. And I thought, I was like, well, this isn't going to help me. And I didn't do it. And
which happens to a lot of folks.
With a lot of folks.
Like I've never come back to it, and even though that was where I started.
Sure, like I think that happens with a lot of people because it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of there that you can do anything with. But when I was at this company making these seating kits, I was also working, like I said, with a lot of really creative and really talented illustrators. And there wasn't a lot of illustration work to be done necessarily for the stuff, but there was like concept illustration. And so, and then I was like, well, like maybe I can try to, I was also a little nervous about bringing illustration into a professional environment where I had only done it like on my own, like at home for fun.
Yeah.
Like there was no deadlines. So I didn't have to worry about that. So I was kind of timid about like pulling that into the environment to do that.
Well, and it's like unsupervised too.
Mm-hmm.
And to bring it into like a critique environment is like, oh no.
Very different. Yeah. And I was like, exactly.
I know how this other stuff's going to play, but this is just a blank slate.
Exactly. Like I didn't know like what would it take? Like what kind of feedback am I going to get? Am I going to have to do this? Am I going to have to resketch everything? And it's like, how fast can I do this? Like those types of questions were coming into it. So I started to get involved in that, and I would play around with the sketching. But what really enabled me to do it faster was the iPad. And Procreate. So the dawn of that was what really brought that element of my career back, where it's like, oh, I can do this faster and I can move this into things so much faster. And I think that made me feel a little more confident about it. So I ended up doing a lot of that and really starting to push that aspect, because I was doing like concept illustrations. That's how I came up, all the boxes was just me drawing boxes and like putting stuff on there. And I got so much out of that. And I was like, I just love this.
Yeah.
And like, I just want to keep doing this. And so I was a graphic designer who I could illustrate. And so I would just keep doing those things. And so a lot of at that company, like there was a lot of different projects where they're like, just do this T-shirt. We're doing this outing. Make a T-shirt for it. And I was just like, yeah. Bring it on. Let me do those things. And so a lot of that stuff, and I just wanted to keep doing it. And I ended up learning that it was a skill that was great to have, and that people kind of wanted it. Which also brings me even to XRAY, because I've been wanting to get involved in XRAY to get a show for a long time, but I couldn't get in.
Yeah, so we should probably explain what so XRAY is a local FM radio station that people can essentially pitch shows to and become DJs.
That's right.
But it's also broadcast online, so you can listen to it from anywhere.
You can listen to it anywhere. It's our local community radio station.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a couple now. We actually have several. The first one that everyone usually knows is KBOO. That's been around
the OGs. They've been around
for years.
40 years, maybe? Something like that?
Something like that. And I remember at first when I moved here, I wanted to get involved because whenever I was in college and after college, I played around being in college radio and stuff like that because I really enjoyed that. Again, because I love music and I love records and collecting records. So it was that really spoke to me. So I wanted to get involved in it again. And I found KBOO was really hard to get into.
Yeah.
That's very difficult. But X-Ray, I thought, well, I'll try this because I saw when it finally started, 2014, I think.
I think you're right, yeah.
So I basically wanted to start getting involved in that, but it was hard for me to get in at that stage. And I was like, I would apply for shows and I wasn't getting anywhere. And I was like, okay, well, that's fine. I don't know anybody there, so maybe that doesn't help. So then eventually I was like, well, I'm going to take a different tact. And I was like, if this isn't going to work, and I was like, maybe I'll try to volunteer and maybe I can offer my design skills and illustration skills. Maybe they could use that. And I was like, I'm sure not everyone's reaching out to them and asking them to do that. So maybe I'll do that.
Yeah.
And they responded very quickly to that. And I'm like, oh, sure. And that was where this came from. I was like, I got to do this.
Oh, that's you're
mine.
Wearing a very beautiful XRAY FM shirt with a classic boombox on the front. So that's your illustration.
That's mine. So
wow.
From a couple years ago, they had a spring fundraising drive. And every year they do a T-shirt for it. And they're like, oh, do you want to do that? And I was like, I most certainly want to do this. This is exactly the type of thing that I want to do. And I was like, I'll do it. And so, again, they were pretty open about what it could be. It needed to be, it needed to be not music based. That was the only thing, because there's talk radio in the mornings.
I guess, yeah, that's true.
It needed to encapsulate both. I was like, all right, well, the boombox does both, so we'll do that. So essentially, I got to do that, and I got to do a couple other I just illustrated a thank you card and things like that. So I got to do those things, and I was really excited, and they were really happy. And so the next time I applied to get a radio show, got right through.
Hey,
and I was like, all right, this is great.
And that's the power of it's one thing to just apply for things, but if you know folks on the inside and can say hey, I want to do this, what are some tips and tricks, or just have them know your name.
Yeah,
it can be really helpful.
It's probably the most obvious thing and the thing that I just refuse to learn.
Well, it's the most obvious thing, but it's the most terrifying thing.
It is the most terrifying thing.
Because it's it gets into that thing of networking, which just never feels great.
No.
But it's really important. And
if you could figure out a way if it doesn't feel natural to you, which it didn't to me, which is why I was I needed to find a way to make it feel more natural. And in that way, I was like, oh, I'm just going to offer this as a skill to them and see how that works. And it worked.
Yeah.
And that opened up the doors.
And probably coming from nonprofits too, the value of volunteer work.
I absolutely did. And so I knew that it would work well. And so I was like, okay, this will be great. And it was really helpful and it was really lovely.
Yeah. Yeah. So how long has Century of Slang been going now?
So not that long. It's only been going on since December.
Really?
So it's been going concern for, what is it now, August? So 9 months. Ish. So yeah, like I said, I've done radio shows throughout, again, college, and then after college I did it a couple times. But and I just love it. And again, I just I just like listen to music, and so this is just an extension of that. And I was just like, it's just a fun way to basically make playlists every week and to play it.
Like I was thinking about that in relation to you talking about like mixtapes being where you started. Like in a way, this is kind of doing that on a larger scale.
It is almost exactly that.
And you're like packaging it up with beautiful artwork every episode. And
that was the other part about it that I realized would be really great, was just like, oh, I could do this show, and this is a vehicle for me to do more design and illustration. I remember there's a band, what was it? Galaxy 500.
Oh, yeah.
You may know. And,
I know very well.
And I always remember from when I was really young, Naomi Wang, I believe her name is, in the band, is a graphic designer.
Oh.
And
that explains a lot.
And she did all of the work for them. And I remember whenever she joined the band, I don't think she really even knew much how to play instruments, but they asked her to join, and she was like, well, I think this would be a good way for me to do design work. This is like being in a band is like you have all this great ways to put your work out there, and I think this is the way I should do it. And I remember thinking about that a lot, and I was like, that's a really interesting idea. Like, that's true.
Yeah.
And so that, to me, like, that was what this was. It was just like a way to do more of that stuff. And it's my thing, and I can, it can be whatever I want it to be. And that's really exciting.
It's beautiful. And I mean, I'm glad that you are actually really like making it happen and putting it out every week, and which is hard.
It's not easy.
But like to be able to assemble an episode like that and share it out like it's a mixtape and broadcast it, it's such a special thing.
It's really fun. And to me, like, just X-Ray is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
And I'm just so happy that it's around. And to me, like, one of the most important things to do for me is to help out, is to be in support of those types of things. Like, if I do nothing else, like, that's one of the most important things. So I want to really, foster X-Ray as a thing, because I don't want it to go away. Even if I like burn out and can't do this anymore, like, I'm just so happy that they're there.
And I think it's really important too to like support community media, which we have been watching newspapers around the country disappear, and in a lot of ways these kind of volunteer organizations like X-Ray and like other things around Kiebu, they're providing a really valuable service, and especially in regions that are less served than ours, can be even more valuable because it might be the only source of news. It's true. Or
it's
media.
Also kind of strange. You talk about the newspaper thing, because you're right; those things are also dying. But it's interesting because radio also seems to be dying.
Yeah, commercial radio
seems to be dying, which is interesting because it's given the opportunity for people like X-Ray to get on, because like you're working with a dial.
Yeah,
like that's the thing. You could do internet radio, and that's a thing, and that's great for everybody. But a lot of the times I feel like being able to just have it there on a dial that you could tune in, that like you don't necessarily need to have a phone or the internet to connect to.
Yeah, it's this piece of equipment
it's just there,
ancient, and it works.
And it works. And so you're now able, like X-Ray and these other people are able to like sneak in there because these other companies are leaving and selling off their portion of the dial. And now, and since maybe the value isn't as high, people are scooping them up.
Yeah.
Kind of like Lloyd Center right now.
Well, that was exactly the metaphor that was in my head, is like, and even thinking back to like Portland circa 95, 96, like, this was not a hot hoppin' city then, just as, Lloyd Center is maybe not although it's gotten a lot better than it was, say, 2 or 3 years ago. But like, there is so much opportunity in that to like do cool stuff and make projects happen that couldn't happen otherwise.
It is so fun to see.
Yeah.
Like, you're right. It can be a little weird and sketchy, but like the weird and sketchy is what makes it so amazing.
That's how it happens.
Like, that's what's so beautiful about it.
Yeah.
Like, it's so wild. Like, like the places that have gone in, like, there's the record store they've left now, but
have they?
Yeah, well, just recently.
Oh.
But it was just great, all the things that they've done. I just went to my wife to go see they put on a play in the old Victoria's Secret.
Did they really?
Yeah, which was like beautiful.
Oh,
it was
my
like
God.
such a bizarre and interesting like Samuel Beckett play that they put on there. That it was just bizarre and beautiful. and so much fun, and in the old Victoria's Secret, which
Oh my God.
might have not known, but you probably could. As a retail,
all
as
the
a retail
fixtures
design-
are still there in all those spaces,
the
basically.
forms are all still there. So
Yeah.
if you remember what a Victoria's Secret looked like, you'd know where you're at. But it was just so fascinating.
It is funny how little it takes to telegraph those spaces. Like we
it's
did a
true.
pop-up event in the Ulta, and it looked so Ulta, even though it had
Right?
no Ulta stuff left in it.
It's amazing. Like
Yeah.
when I think about that in terms of, again, being a retail designer and like the language of a store and just what the architecture of the inside the store looks like and how that conveys all of that is just without anything, without any branding, without any clothes, without any, barely the color. The color's kind of there, but it's just like, but you know what it is.
Yeah.
Like you can
A lot
can
of
feel
discolored patches on the floor where
Right,
things used to
exactly.
be sitting.
Uh-huh. So, but that's so amazing, and I feel like that's so impressive and beautiful, and I really do love what they've been doing, even if it is maybe not long for this world, because
Well, yeah.
eventually,
baseball.
in many ways, you're able to do it because you know what's coming next,
Yeah.
and that no one necessarily wants to buy into this place because it feels like its days are numbered. But in the meantime, the magic that is happening here, and like all of the energy and excitement and the risk taking that you're able to do is just, it feels like the most special and very like Portland thing that, and I'm very happy that I'm here to see it a little bit.
Yeah.
Like that, I feel very happy for that.
And that you're kind of contributing to it by working with X-Ray.
In my own
Yeah.
way, yeah. And so like that, again, like that felt great.
Yeah.
And so I really am happy about that. And so I hope all the listeners tune into X-Ray at some point or another, even if not my show, anybody's show.
Speaking of that, how do people do that? How do people find X-Ray?
So you can go, if you're in Portland, you can turn to 107.1 FM, or was it 91? Yeah, 91.1 FM. So those are the two that are in town. 107.1 is a stronger signal. And we've been expanding. You can even get it on the coast now.
Yeah, out in Nehalem.
Yeah, Nehalem. So that's really nice. So my show is on Saturdays from 5 to 6. A Century of Slang is its name. And that's great. But the thing is, like, there's so many unbelievably talented DJs who know so much about so much different music that it's hard to find a bad time to tune in. So yeah, if that's of interest, you should definitely do that. And again, or you go to XRAY.FM on the internet and you could tune in from there as well.
Yeah, anywhere in the world you can hear this show and all the other shows.
And back shows.
Yeah.
So they're all archived. Like, so all 34 episodes that I've done thus far are up there somewhere. So you don't ever feel like you've missed anything.
You don't have to miss a thing.
Oh, thank you.
Please don't copyright match me. Please, YouTube. I got a copyright strike for singing the worst parody rendition of Candle in the Wind.
Oh my God, really? How much did you sing of it?
I mean, I think what is happening is that they're monetizing the video, but they're paying it back to the original Candle in the Wind writers. I don't know if that was Elton John or somebody else, but yeah. Just to let you know how weird that world is. If people want to find out more about your work, Brandon, where do they do that?
So my website, which is brandononline.co, has all of my design work and all of my illustration work and things like that. But I'm on Instagram under probably not the easiest name to find, but it's B as in for my first name, and as in Brandon, and then Hrycyk as my last name, Hrycyk. So that long combination of letters is where you could find me on Instagram.
Yeah, you pronounced it exactly the way that some of my pronunciation websites that I checked out before the show said it, where they just spelled it as a recording. No, that's nothing. I can spell it.
Yeah, so that's where most of my work is. Like I said, all the stuff that I've at least made available for the internet is up there.
It's beautiful. Go check it out. Thank you so much, Brandon.
Thank you so much, Sean. I love your show, and I really am happy that you had me. I'm very grateful. This was a lot of fun.
I love your show. It's a really beautiful musical time.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate it.
And thank you also, everyone who is hearing this. If you like this show, whether you're hearing it for the first time or you're an old listener, maybe maybe dressed up Clump style in a costume, or maybe actually old, who knows? Then you can subscribe to it in whatever podcast player you happen to use. Easiest way is just search for the show's title. But, if you want to simplify that, why not pay a visit to our website, dididothat.design. There you can find some good images that go along with each and every episode, including this one. And if you want those images delivered directly to you, you can follow the show on Instagram. Give us a follow on YouTube and LinkedIn, of course, as well. This is Did I Do That? I'm Sean Schumacher. And as we always say at the end of every episode...
I didn't do it. You didn't see me do it. You can't prove anything.
I didn't do it. You didn't see me do it. Okay, bye.
Bye. I've been tricking and fooling telemarketers for as long as I've been alive.
Oh God, that's gotta be.
Oh, it's actually kind of funny.
That's actually gotta be the perfect thing.
It's pretty great.
Yeah.
It's like, hello, can I please speak to Brand? And they'll be like that. They'll be like the audio will like just stumble and like I don't know what to say.
Well, I've even had that with mine because Schumacher is I think just complicated enough that they
for sure.
will. I've actually had one telemarketer go, "Hello, I'm hoping to speak to Mr." and then just hang up.
Which is great.
But yeah, I admire that more than almost anything else.
Your name's doing all the work for you.
Yeah, it saved me the trouble. So, he had the wisdom to bail when he did not have the courage to succeed.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Look at that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, look at those beans.
Those beans, though.
Roll that beautiful bean sweatsuit.
Well, yeah, that's going to be...
Oh, I love that.
God. What am I doing with my life?
No, I think it's great. And even the shoes.